What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Jaws 3D. Jaws 3. Whatever you want to call it. That's what we're talking about here today. And I'm very happy to be joined by a very good friend and fantastic movie reviewer. And that is my buddy D, Movieman. We're going to be hearing his thoughts in just a little bit. But I figured I'd start this off by saying, why does this movie exist? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are talking about Jaws 3D, directed by Joe Alves and starring people like Dennis Quaid, Bess Armstrong, Simon and Matt Corkindale, Lewis Garrett Jr., John Putch, Leah Thompson, and many more. Jaws 3D, or Jaws 3, is the one that takes place at SeaWorld. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another Jaws video. It's been a little bit since we did the last Jaws movie, and once again I'm very happy to be joined in this video by my buddy D, Movieman. He's joined me for the last two movies as well, and we're going to be talking about the fourth film after this as well, and you guys are going to be hearing his thoughts in just a little bit. But I want to invite you to go down below in the description box, go over to his channel, subscribe, and go give him some love and let him know I sent you, where you can go and find some fantastic movie reviews and breakdowns. And we're going to be getting into his thoughts in just a little moment. But yeah, before we get too far into this, Jaws 3. This is a movie that I remember seeing tons of times as a kid. It was just part of that era of growing up in the 90s where just movies were on repeat all the time on cable. And as somebody who doesn't really watch cable all that much today, I don't really know what movies get a lot of repeat time on regular cable these days. But with all that said, it had been many years since I had seen this movie, and if you guys have been following this channel at all when it comes to any shark reviews, specifically these Jaws videos, you know that sharks are my absolute biggest fear. So when it comes to watching movies like this, even if they are terrible, even if they are hilariously cheesy, whatever the case may be, there is always a slight lack of comfort in who I am and in my soul when watching movies like this, especially with the underwater stuff, simply because the look and feel of a shark it terrifies me. It just really does. So even with a movie like this, there are times where I'm watching the movie and the underwater scenes are happening, and while a shark may look insanely fake and the effects have taken a huge dip since the first film, I still feel uncomfortable at times with the underwater scenes in this movie. So I just thought I'd say that as kind of a fun fact, and something that I don't think is ever really going to go away when it comes to me. But Jaws 3, this is the one that takes place at SeaWorld, which is always really surprising to me. I don't really understand why SeaWorld was okay with this being a thing that happened. Of course, they're showcasing the fact that the dolphins are the heroes in this movie at times. They end up fighting the sharks and have this nice little moment at the very end of the film where everything is fun and dandy and the dolphins save the day with this terrible effects that the dolphins jump out of the water at the very end of the film. But beyond that, honestly, I can't even understand the idea of a theme park centered around, not only showing us aquatic life, but also preserving aquatic life, or at least that's what they say. I can't even imagine the idea of them today wanting to sign themselves up with a major studio film about a shark wreaking havoc in their park and eating people. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The idea that they would ever greenlight something like this, the idea that they would ever allow something like this to happen, makes absolutely no sense to me. And as a kid, when I was watching this movie, that's something that didn't really click with me. But now today, I can't even imagine the horrible publicity that a movie like this would give a company like SeaWorld. And let's be honest, they don't necessarily need any help having bad publicity in recent years. And so, yeah, going into this movie, just watching it, that was something I was just thinking the entire time. It's just, what a horrible marketing tactic on their part to center a movie in their theme park where one of these aquatic creatures, in this case one that snuck in, is killing people. It just doesn't make sense at all. It is absolutely laughable in my opinion, and it was something I definitely have to talk about here at the start of this video. Now, I have plenty to say on this movie, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it on over to my buddy D Movieman, where he's going to give a breakdown of the film, his thoughts, give us some fun facts, and we'll get back to my thoughts in just a moment.
Hey everyone, this is D Movieman. fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, I am coming to you all at long last with yet another review collaboration with the one and only Anthony A. Perez. Shout out to you, Anthony, for subjecting me, for providing me the opportunity, yes, to watch and review this film. We are once again continuing our foray into the Jaws franchise with Jaws 3, aka Jaws 3D. The third dimension is terror. Directed by Joe Alves and starring Dennis Quaid, Bess Armstrong, Leah Thompson, and Gossett Jr. So, I'm going to start with the pros. Yes, that is exactly what I'm going to do. So, as I just mentioned, this film is directed by Joe Alves, who was the production designer for the first two Jaws films, in addition to the films Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Escape from New York. And he was also the second unit director for Jaws 2. How nice it is to have someone involved in the making of those first two films, now making their feature directorial debut with this film. As I also previously mentioned, Dennis Quaid, Leah Thompson, and Gossett Jr. are all starring in this film, and it was actually really nice to see them, especially because I have fond childhood memories with all three. Dennis Quaid in The Parent Trap, Leah Thompson in Dennis the Menace, and Gossett Jr. in The Josephine Baker Story. There are some underwater shots here that look pretty nice, and I did think it was pretty cool that this was filmed on location at SeaWorld Orlando, which I also realized takes on a very different meaning in the present day. But I will also say that similar to my experience on Jaws the Ride at Universal Studios Orlando when I was young, I have a very fond memory of my dad taking me to SeaWorld with my family there as well. And it was absolutely a blast. So being able to see it actually filmed there at the park on location in the 80s is actually pretty cool. Lastly, I thought the red and black title card and display of Jaws 3 with the jaws actually clamping down was quite visually striking. And now I'm going to jump over to the cons. How much time we have again? Listen, I will be very transparent and honest and say that I don't really know where to begin. Yet and still, I will muster up every ounce of strength that I have deep within me to explore the depths to which this film completely devolves in comparison to the first two films. It's funny, because usually when I get to the end of a film like this one, there's usually a certain sentiment that comes to mind. But I've also realized that that very same sentiment can come in the middle of watching said film. Sometimes you're just sitting there, staring at the screen, and all you can say to yourself is, what the f***? Jaws 3 isn't just bad. It's not so bad it's good. It's not even just inferior or unsatisfactory. Jaws 3 is an astronomical disaster in every possible way. To this day, this remains Joe Alves' sole directing credit, and it's very clear why. Now, I don't think all of this is just his fault. There were clearly a lot of external circumstances that went on, a lot of foolishness during production. Just a lot of what happened here were due to circumstances that were quite honestly beyond his control. Yet and still, this is sadly a reflection of his direction to some extent, and ultimately it is his name that is attached to it. Let's point out the obvious, shall we? There is no one from the first two films that appears in this one, and I suppose we should thank God for small favors. Fun fact, this was originally conceived as a spoof film called Jaws 3, People Zero. And I think had it actually gone down that route, this film would have been delightfully entertaining. However, the studio decided to turn it down because they felt that spoofing this film would have been a mistake. I don't really need to say it, do I? So for starters, this looks like a TV movie in every way possible. There is nothing cinematic about it. It looks extremely cheap, like bargain basement bin cheap. And, I learned something new. Watching a film from 1983 with post 3D processing and resolution, watching that on an HD television is a chaotic experience, to say the least. And then when it comes to the 3D itself, it is quite literally garbage. You guys know, I try to be mindful of my terminology. I try to balance things out, but there's no getting around it. Like, there's no other word here. The green screen, the effects. I understand we talk about films being dated, and sometimes I don't agree with that because it's like, look, if a film is made in the 1940s, like, what can we do about that? But I do understand that some films do age better than others. Unfortunately, because of how this film was made, it takes what might have been maybe a decent, serviceable, not that great film, even with the cheapness, even with the way it was made, it would at least been tolerable. But instead, we have something that is so intensely ugly and so hard on the eyes that it almost feels like you are having some kind of really intense acid trip. It is hideous in every possible way. It also really does not help that we have thrown away the entire concept and idea of, hiding the shark and it being this unseen force. And I get it, we don't have to repeat the same beats, but my goodness, did you even try? You know what? I'm just gonna spoil it. Who cares? Not me. Apparently, there is a scene where there is a baby shark that is dying in a display exhibit. And we watch these two doing their best to save the baby shark. All these people are gathered around. They're just really hoping they can turn this around, like, we can save the baby shark. We can do this. And the poor baby shark is slowly losing its life force. And I was sitting there like, I am literally watching these two actors carry around a plastic baby shark prop toy and walking around like, oh no, the poor baby shark, we're losing it, oh no, the baby shark is dead. I was at a loss for words.
Hell no! Please, be done!
And speaking of sharks, apparently we are throwing out all sense of logic and reason, because who cares about that? It seems that sharks now have the ability to just crack glass at will and completely dismantle structures that were built with fortified glass and steel. Now, the acting is nothing to write home about from pretty much anybody in this film, but man, these background extras. I mean, you don't really expect background extras to be great, but they sucked. I think it's time for me to offer up a confession. A big part of what likely contributed to the delay in getting this third review collaboration out is the fact that I kept falling asleep every time I watched it. This film was absolutely a snooze. And no, I don't mean I fell asleep once and then I resumed. I fell asleep multiple times in a 90-minute film. Wow. My brain and my body were both so thoroughly unengaged in this film that it could not stay awake, not once, not twice, even 3 times to close out this film and give a review. And I did watch this in the middle of the day all 3 times.
We don't say that, but now we said it, okay?
So I'm going to bring this to a close with another fun fact. Dennis Quaid himself stated that of all the films he made, the most aggressive use of cocaine came during the filming of Jaws 3D, and that he was high on the drug in every frame in which he appears. And I will simply state that I understand. Because as someone with no vices and no real attachments to drugs, drug use, or any of that, I too wished I was high on something, anything, while watching this film. So I'm going to go ahead and give Jaws 3 an F+. And yet, it astonishes me to think that there is yet another film left in the franchise, and it will likely be worse than this one.
This is not right! This is f***ed up!
You know, Anthony, it seems that you may have set an unintentional trap for me with this franchise. Don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for the experience of the first film and even the second. But now, here we are. Were it not for the fact that we started off with those first 2 films, and you told me to simply collaborate with you on this one, I would most likely have some choice words for you after this was over. But now that there is still a 4th film to cover, there's still very much an opportunity to send those choice words your way.
You want to talk to me outside? You want to talk to me outside? Come on. No, not really. Talk to me outside. Talk to me outside, Yandy. Talk to me outside.
But in the meantime, this is D, Movieman, signing off. And I'll see you at the movies.
A big thanks to D Movieman for joining me here for yet another video. Always a pleasure to have you in any video, my friend. And please, don't fight me. The 4th film is also not that great. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on that one, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you guys who are watching down below in the comments, letting us know what you guys think about this movie, this franchise, which is your favorite, which is your least favorite, and I'm pretty sure I know which one is everybody's favorite. But without further ado, let's get into the rest of my thoughts on this movie. As D Movieman spoke about, this movie is pretty bad. From the effects, to the acting, to the dialogue, to the character logic, this movie is a mess from beginning to end. And one thing I always forget about when it comes to this movie is the fact that Dennis Quaid is the main star, and he's playing the son of Brody from the previous films, as well as John Putch, who's also playing a son from Brody from the previous films. But of course, Sheriff Brody does not make an appearance in this film because outside of the name, there really isn't much about this movie that connects these characters to the previous installments when it comes to their actions and how we're handling anything here. And I think it goes without saying that Lewis Garrett Jr., who plays the boss, the CEO, or the president or whatever of SeaWorld at this time, the guy who's running the show, he is without a doubt the reason that everything in this movie goes wrong. I mean, he is making absolutely every terrible decision at every turn. It was always about him being able to make more money, always about him trying to boost viewership at the park, or having people stay there, audiences getting excited for sharks or whatever the case may be. Every decision he makes throughout the course of the movie is either driven by money or trying to bring in audiences to see a shark, or just anything that was really selfish. And every single time he made one of these choices, every single time he made one of these decisions, it ultimately led to people dying, things going wrong, and it just was a terrible decision from beginning to end. The shark is just doing what sharks do, I guess. Obviously, it's a monster in the case of this film versus a real shark, but he is without a doubt the reason that everything goes wrong in this movie. And as Movieman was talking about, I think it's really interesting that Dennis Quaid was on cocaine for a big majority of this film. I know he's spoken about kind of a very strong struggle with that in his past, but yeah, I guess now looking back on the film, I can totally see how he was probably on cocaine during some of these scenes. I always also forget that Leah Thompson is in this film, of course, from Back to the Future fame, and yeah, she just plays this super minor role that's just kind of there. And that's kind of the issue with this film all around, is that there aren't really very many characters that are given a whole lot to do. The only real big characters that we have any focus on are Dennis Quaid's character, as well as his girlfriend in the film, played by Bess Armstrong, known as Catherine. And yeah, she has a lot of love for the animals. She wants to take care of them. She's a biologist. Somehow she's doing things that I doubt biologists would be doing, working at SeaWorld. There are some things she does that I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And then there's some things that I'm like, okay, I don't really think that she'd be doing that job there. But, you know, they're fine in the film as the two main leads. There's not really much about them that's all that enticing or exciting or fun to watch. Their performances are probably some of the better in the film, but that isn't really a high bar to jump over. And then, of course, the movie's called Jaws 3D, so we have to take a moment and talk about these horrible 3D effects because, as Movieman was showcasing earlier, they're really bad. And I watched this film via a Blu-ray copy on my 4K player on a 4K TV, and sure, maybe there's a 4K version of this film out there somewhere, but I'm watching it in pretty good resolution, or at least as good as I can get it, and this film looks atrocious. And part of it is really the color grading, because of the fact that this film was made to be in 3D. There are so many moments off on the sides of the screen, or even sometimes right in the dead center, where you can slightly see different layers of the actual picture that you're seeing that might have a bit of a blue and red filter, obviously leading back to what 3D glasses and different things like that were like back in that time. So over the course of the film, there's a nasty bit of grain across the entire film that doesn't have that classic film grain, but just feels really muddy, and it's hard to see at times. And there are times where it just actually looks blurry, and specifically on the corners of the screen. Watching the copy that I was watching, you can just definitely tell that they had a hard time taking the 3D version of this film and processing it into something that's going to be playing on a Blu-ray player, obviously decades after this film was filmed. And as somebody who lives here in Orlando, Florida, I think it's hilarious that though this film was filmed at SeaWorld in Orlando, there are so many parts of this park in this version that we're seeing in the movie that are nothing even close to what we have at the actual SeaWorld here. Now, of course, this is from decades ago, so the park has had renovations and changes over the course of time, but there's a lot about this film in terms of the underwater stuff and different things like that that are just a fantasy that for somebody who lives here, it's kind of funny to see how they depicted it in this movie versus how the actual park looks. Now, let's talk about the shark, because that's kind of the main face of the movie, and when it comes to the shark in this film, without a doubt, the effects are the worst that they've been in this franchise thus far. The first film, still to this day, while having some dated effects when it comes to the shark, definitely has a lot of great scenes with the shark, and the benefit that that film really had was the fact that Steven Spielberg chose to keep the shark hidden for majority of the screen time. So when he does show up, it does become very effective. A lot of times the shark sometimes is in the background or slightly in the foreground in a way where you can almost slightly see the character or the shark without it really feeling like it's really having a lot of focus on it. Whereas in this film, there is a lot of focus and a lot of camera time on the animatronic that often doesn't really service the film. It often takes away from the look and the feel of the movie, and it's just so easy in so many of these shots to be like, that is the fakest looking shark I've ever seen. Now, as I mentioned before, I am absolutely petrified of sharks though, so the idea of me being in the water with this animatronic is not something I think I could ever do, to be completely honest. Despite watching this film and thinking the effects are bad, despite watching this film and thinking the performances, the acting, the character logic, and the script are absolutely atrocious, I honestly could never get myself in the water with an animatronic nearly as bad as this, and anything better, absolutely not. So despite feeling this movie was absolutely terrible, there were still some shots of the shark underwater that just make me feel uneasy, simply because it's a shark. It looks kind of ugly, it looks terrifying, and yeah, sharks just freak me out, even if it's not a great animatronic. And I think one of the scenes that I just have to mention here that I know Movieman already spoke about is the scene where the shark shatters the glass to the control room. I mean, That shot, the special effects to bring that to life, absolutely hilarious. I thought that it was hilarious when I was a kid too. I remember thinking it was really bad back then as well. And yeah, just watching it all these years later, it's hilariously bad. I watched this film with my fiance for her very first time, and she was just laughing at so many of the 3D effects over the course of the film and just how bad it looked. The scenes with the submarine going underwater as well, absolutely laughable from beginning to end. And without a doubt, that is what makes this film so funny to watch. It's the special effects. There are moments in this film that are just so bad to look at, and some of the character logic and some of the extras in the background just make this film so laughably bad, on top of a bad script, on top of weak performances, and on top of a weak story overall. Jaws 3D came out in 1983, and it's a film that I honestly cannot see myself revisiting anytime soon. It had been many years since I'd seen it. I'd seen it many times in the past as a kid, but after all these years, revisiting Jaws 3D for this video will probably be the last time I do it in quite some time. I won't say it will be the last time I'll do it ever, but I can't foresee myself rewatching any of these films except for the first film anytime soon. I'd like to say a big thanks to you guys for watching this video, as well as hitting that like button because it helps the channel out, and leaving your thoughts down below. Are you a fan of Jaws 3D? Do you like this film? Ironically, I know there are some people who are a huge fan of this film because of how ridiculous it is and how stupid it is, and on that level I can totally respect that, as there are plenty of films from this era that are really schlocky and cheesy that I have a lot of fun watching. But when it comes to Jaws 3D, this movie was hilariously bad to watch. I did have laughs throughout, there was entertainment value, but it's not something I could ever see myself revisiting in the near future at all. Again, a big thanks to my buddy D Movieman for joining me here for another Jaws review. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. Go give him some love, let him know I sent you. But for now, I'll leave you guys with the question: is Jaws 3 or Jaws 3D a good movie? Is it a bad movie? Whatever the case may be, definitely leave your comments down below and let me know what you guys think about this movie. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.